You hear me? Yeah. Good morning. I feel like Tim Cook. Good morning. We have great products for you today. It's a great day at Apple. No. Okay. Excuse me? It's not bad, actually. There you go. So I'm actually very honored to be. It's the first time I do a keynote speech. So thanks, guys, for inviting me to do this. And this is a very fun talk. It's the second time I'm going to present this. Scotty has already seen me, so you can judge if this presentation is better than the previous one or so on. I hope so. And so it all starts with a story, because we are storytellers. And this is a big, big story that I'm going to tell you this morning. No need for laptops, no need for anything. Just open your eyes and let us go a little bit back in time. Because my name is Adrian. I'm a 43-year-old self-taught software developer, and this is my story. One day, I was scouting on Twitter, as probably some of you, if you follow me, you know that I spend way too much time on Twitter. And I came across this graph, and it's actually quite funny, because there's, for those maybe on the back, it basically it's a graph that explains the amount of life satisfaction depending on your age. So there's an inflection point, there's a kind of crossing point of the two lines at the age of 40, more or less. It's kind of interesting thing to me. And I was wondering, at some point, after 2 episodes of burnout, I was wondering whether I was on the red or on the blue line. And that reflection took me to where it all began for me. And that was in 1997. To be precise, it was somewhere north of Buenos Aires, in Argentina. I was born in Argentina. I live now in Switzerland, but I live half of my life, right now, half of my life in Argentina. And in Olivos, it's a location north of Buenos Aires. It's a beautiful small city, north of Buenos Aires. And I started there in a small startup back then. The day was Monday, October 6th, 1997, at around 10 a.m. Local time, Buenos Aires. This is how I look like. Seriously, this photo was taken a couple of days before, because I have done my new documents. Thank you. Yeah, I look worried in this picture. It's actually quite intimidating to be in the Argentine police. I gotta tell you, it's not a nice feeling. So this is how I look like. And basically, this is what the web used to look like back then, okay? There were no cookie warnings. That was one of the great things about that time. You didn't get we are saving your privacy. You had to accept the cookies. Of course, give them the cookies. It's okay. What can I do anyway without them? And lots of things were happening. You know, 1997 was a very interesting point in time. When you think about it, this had happened a couple of days before I started my first job, you know? This was in August 1997. Steve Jobs announcing that Bill Gates is pouring a couple of $1 million to revive Apple, who was not doing that well back then. It's really other Apple that we see and know today. The remains of the Che Guevara, because I am from Argentina, of course, the Che Guevara is also Argentine, so they found the remains of Che Guevara in Bolivia, and they took them to Cuba a couple of days before. The 4th season of Friends had just started a couple of weeks before. Okay, I'm a big Friends fan, so this is something that I remember vividly. We were still mourning Princess Diana. Actually, more important than that, Mother Teresa had just passed away, and as well as Roy Lichtenstein or Gianni Versace. And people were playing Final Fantasy VII like crazy on their PlayStations. This was the big, big thing back then, right? And the Teletubbies started broadcasting a couple of days before. Of course, nobody knew that it would have the cultural impact that it had. And this was about to happen. They were finishing the production of this movie, which would go to be the biggest blockbuster in the history of cinema a couple of days later. This is what a smartphone used to look like. This is a smartphone, 1997 Nokia 6500 communicator with a 25 megahertz Intel 386 chip inside. Very interesting choice, with a couple of kilobytes of RAM. I don't know exactly how many kilobytes or megabytes of RAM. This is a smartwatch. of 1997. Not so many apps, but the battery life was incredible. I mean, seriously, you would get 10 years of battery. I mean, you wouldn't believe that. But not so many apps. That's right. Kasparov had just lost a game against Deep Blue. Very interesting, because Deep Blue was not technically an artificial intelligence engine. It was a brute force kind of procedure, but it worked. I mean, the guy lost actually a series of matches against Deep Blue. So it was a big deal back then. This had just happened. In my opinion, one of the greatest songs ever produced, and these poor guys were starting to pay royalties to the Rolling Stones like crazy for pretty much the rest of their lives, which is very sad. People were starting to get really anxious about the year 2000, really, and actually, in some cases, actually, the prophecy was fulfilled, as you can see. This is a billboard somewhere in France that I found where basically the software wasn't ready for that. Many movies happened in 1997. Many movies were set up in 1997. Like, for example, The Godfather 3, or you have Predator, or most importantly, Terminator 2, which specifies that Skynet would wake up at 2:14 a.m. on August 29th, 1997. Remember that. Maybe you remember that line and the famous Judgment Day, right? It turns out that this didn't happen, because we're still here somehow. However, interestingly enough, on 15th of September 1997, somebody registered a domain called google.com. So you never know if the prophecy was fulfilled or not. But it's kind of an interesting thing. So I got my first job. So I worked in a beautiful sunny day. It was a beautiful spring day because it's the southern hemisphere. It was spring. To my new job. And my new job consisted of basically making a website, because this was a startup. This is 1997. Everybody wanted to be on the NASDAQ and have an IPO. I used Windows NT Server 4.0. That was the web server that we were using. We were using Windows 95 and Windows NT Workstation 4.0 machines back in Buenos Aires. This server was located somewhere in upstate New York, somewhere, I think it was MCI WorldCom before it crashed, and that's another story. So basically, this is what Windows NT would look like. So you would click on the Start button, and you would have the possibility of configuring IIS and SQL Server, right? Because that's what we were using as a database. It was SQL Server 6.5, Service Pack 1, I remember vividly, and IIS, I think version 2.0, if I'm not mistaken, or 1.0, something like that. This is what my IDE looked like. I was a big fan of Edit Plus back in the day. I mean, there was this big controversy between Ultra Edit and Edit Plus. I mean, I think Ultra Edit sucks or sucked. I don't know if it still exists. Edit Plus still exists. And it's actually a very good editor, and I like it very much. I also use a little bit of Hot Metal Pro. Raise your hands if you've ever used Hot Metal Pro, please. There we go. It's only the white birded guys right here. Very good. So, what else did we have? Of course, the product of our elaborations run on Netscape or on Internet Explorer, which were back then the most important web. Who did that? Okay, seriously, I don't like this. Okay, so there we go. I'm sorry about this. I'm sorry about this. I really, this is ridiculous. I hate this. Okay, where was I? Yes, Internet Explorer and Netscape. And Netscape was about to be basically busted because Netscape 4, this is version 3 that you see there, but Netscape 4 was basically the last version before it disappeared into oblivion to be reborn as Firefox around 2003, 2004. So this was our technology landscape. And this was the world where I started working, right? And that happened exactly to this day, 6,920 days ago. During these 6,920 days ago, so many things have happened in my life. I I got married. That's the most important of all. And I'm still married to Claudia, my wife. We celebrated 10 years of marriage a couple of days ago. Thank you so much, thank you so much. And, but not only that, I basically started my own business and then I closed it, but that's another story. And I also had an open source project being featured by Eric Asadoun himself, and those of you who are into Swift and iOS in general, you know who Eric Asadoun is, and all of a sudden I have a phone call from a friend, you're on the front page of Ars Technica, and I'm like, what? I then made it to the mid page of one of the greatest, one of the most important magazines in Switzerland that appears on Sunday, talking about apps. This was a big thing back then, and my name appeared there, and then again I was like, what? And I was featured on TV twice, once in Bolivia, once in Switzerland. For those with good sight, you are going to see that my name was misspelled in both countries. Now, the Bolivian version is the one I preferred, Kosmaczewski. I don't even know how to pronounce that, seriously. Fantastic. I remember the guy coming to me before the program, says, how do you write your name? And I wrote it. And I have horrible writing, so it's not his fault, basically. But when I saw the transcription, I was like, seriously? That's what you got? Okay. And I wrote 2 books, which are completely to be forgotten if you want. So seriously, it's okay. The most important thing in terms of a professional life might be that I had to come up with strategies of survival. Because it's a tough world out there. You know it. I don't have to tell you this. So somehow, I tried to summarize everything that I've learned in these almost 20 years in 12 tips. 12 things, 12 ideas, 12 actions that have helped me cope with many situations during my career, and I hope they will help you. And the first one is probably the most important, I think, is forget the hype. Every new year, you've got in this industry something new. You know it. Every new year, I would say even every 6 months, you've got some new technology coming out, splashed on the pages of the IT magazines or on the websites, and you have the press making you feel guilty that you're not following, that you're not actually paying attention, that you're not learning that technology. And it's ridiculous. And then I started thinking, okay, let us go back in time once more. What were the hypest technology back in 1997? Corba and RUP, of course. These were the big things back there. All the books were written about these things back then. In 2000 it was SOAP and XML. Everything was SOAP and XML back in 2000. Remember that, right? There we go. MDA and software factories, who remember this one? Model-driven architecture. This was a very big thing. The idea was basically to replace any old software developers with just a designer tool where you would drag and drop class diagrams on UML. That was basically the idea of model-driven architecture. In 2006, it was the semantic web and the one laptop per child, which kind of, the one laptop per child is still kind of there, but I don't know how many countries are actually using them. 2009 was augmented reality. All of a sudden, everybody started having these little phones with cameras and everything, so everybody would apparently go around hunting for restaurants with their iPhones like that on the street. Of course, it tanked. Nobody does that, ever. In 2012 was big data. Actually, it was also not really useful because big data, only NASA and CERN use big data. All the rest, it's okay. With a good database, you're good to go. Seriously, you don't have that much of big data. And now, apparently, it's virtual reality and bots. So it's still open. I don't know how much of hype it is, but it's still hype. It is something that I still consider a little bit of hype. So I leave you with this quote about how some of these technologies sometimes are not that good. Simple object access protocol for SOAP, except it's not simple, it's complicated, and it's not about objects, it's about RPC, so really it's crap. There you go. Very simple. And all of these technologies, they follow the same pattern. You have, you know, the Gardner curve, and they are going to tell you, oh, right now bots and augmented reality are here or there, and then you have to somehow use this to calculate the movements in your career. All of that is bullshit, let me tell you. It's absolute bullshit, and we've been reinventing the wheel ever since in every technology. Every time there's a new programming language, there's, for example, this last couple of years, you had it with JavaScript. JavaScript reinvented the whole concept of, for example, makefiles. You call it gulp, you call it grunt, or whatever you want, but it's still makefiles. We are coming back again to the same ideas once and again, and hype, it's something that doesn't really help. It's more noise than signal, okay? My advice to you is the following, is don't pay attention to hype. There's going to be always an HR manager telling, oh, have you heard about the new thing? Forget about it. You are going to always have your manager coming to you saying, oh, we could probably try this. No. Continue doing your thing. Concentrate on the basics of your profession of a software developer. And only pay attention to hype after a couple of months, after a couple of years, when you see that, oh, actually, well, it's sticking. Or maybe, if you want to do it, maybe just because it really represents a genuine interest inside of you. Somehow you feel, no, wait a second, this iPhone thing could be something. This is something that happened to me, and it paid off. But it was a conscious decision of saying, I actually think this might take off, so I'm going to pay attention to it. Otherwise, hype, it's noise. Choose your galaxy wisely. This is a very simple advice. What is a galaxy? A galaxy is not this, but just put this to show while I talk. It's the only slide about this topic. A galaxy for me is, technologies. When you are into the .NET world, when you are a Cocoa developer, you're maybe an SAP app developer, and you spend your life inside of those galaxies. And those galaxies have, very bright meteors that shine in the light with a very bright light for a couple of minutes, and then they disappear forever in the night. You have black holes. You have some planets. Some of those planets have life, actually. Some of them are inhabited. You've got, of course, conferences, evangelists, developers, video trainings, books, tutorials, websites set up with blogs, video podcasts, questions on Stack Overflow. All of that is part of the galaxy that you choose whenever you choose a technology. You get out of school, you say, okay, I'm going to be an SAP developer. By the way, it's a very good choice. You can make pretty incredible amounts of money doing SAP applications, depending, at least in Switzerland you can. But seriously, pay attention to the galaxy that you're going to choose, because that will define a lot of the human interactions that you're going to have with your peers. In my personal experience, I spent half of my career in the Microsoft galaxy, and then one day I made a hyper jump and I landed in the Apple galaxy. Of course, while I was on the Microsoft galaxy, I had a telescope pointing to the Apple galaxy, so every so often I would take a peek and see that it was actually very cool. There were very nice stars, very bright, lots of supernovas as well, but it was plenty of life. And I said, wow, this looks good. And to be fair, the reason why I took the hyper jump was Steve Ballmer, literally. That can be on record. I have no trouble saying it. The guy was an idiot. He broke down many developers, and many people who I know left the Microsoft Galaxy altogether during that time. So it's the choice they made. That's how it goes. What I found on the Apple Galaxy, which is the one that brought me here in front of you, it's a lot of art, a lot of creativity. People who would be musicians, artists, and then would code as well, and would come with incredible ideas for new applications. And when the iPhone came out, well, that's another story. The whole thing took off rather spectacularly. So pick your galaxy wisely. This is very important. Now, how do you pick your galaxy, right? Well, I found out I have a small passion, which is actually reading books about software history. I'm quite passionate about the subject. I like to read about how the von Neumann architecture came to be, or how the programming languages were created, who invented them. And having this knowledge helps me choose my galaxies for the future. That I'm pretty sure about. And knowing these information is actually very simple to start doing. For example, let's say that you're a .NET developer. You like C#. C# is a beautiful language. I like it a lot. Who created C#? Well, it turns out that it's the same guy who had made Turbo Pascal at Borland a couple of years before. there you go. And oh, wow, now you understand why the naming conventions in .NET look so similar to those of Pascal back in the day. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of lines and connections that appear. And having this information can help you make decisions for the future. It's very important to know the past to be able to understand the future. And that's why I'm giving you these ideas, 6 ideas for books that tell beautiful stories about the history of software. I'm rereading Dealers of Lightning right now as well. I have many books rereading as well. Yesterday I mentioned the algorithms book, but this one in particular is absolutely fantastic. Dealers of Lightning is the story of the Palo Alto Research Center in California in the 70s. So that's where the first computer with Ethernet networking, email, a GUI, with a mouse and laser printers were invented. In 1974, there was a network of 8 or 10 computers of this kind, sending email, doing electronic conversations back in 1974. This is like, this was better than Star Trek, in my opinion. And the whole stories of how this came to be are incredible. Revolution in the Valley, about how the Mac was made. The Cathedral and the Bazaar, of course, this is a big classic about the history and the foundations of open source. The success of open source, here, this book by Steven Weber, this one right there, on the bottom left. It's written by a political scientist. He's no computer scientist. It's a doctor in politics who studies the human relationships that lead to the creation and the destruction of open source projects. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And it tells the story of how Unix came to be, and C, and Stallman, and GNU, and Linux, and everything that we know these days that we take for granted somehow came to be. The Old New Thing, if you're a Windows developer, you should be reading The Old New Thing several times a year to remind yourself of where you're standing on. Raymond Chen was one of the chief developers in Windows from 1985 to 2005, at least, if I'm not mistaken. The guy really knew Windows inside out, and he explains in this book many design choices made when they created the operating system. Incredibly interesting. And of course, the Mythical Man Month, the story of the OS 360 project in IBM in the 60s. This is a book that you should probably all read, and it's not very long to read. There's plenty of history in these books. There's plenty of technologies to pay attention that still today exist, that have a very rich history. And learning these technologies, even if some of them look outdated, will actually make you appreciate or hate the current state of things. But you can make better choices this way.
Saleté. Vim. Graisse. Vim. Microbe. Vim. Vim au chlorax. Récure à fond. Désinfecte à fond.
And today I learned that Vim still exists in India, which I didn't know because in Europe it doesn't exist anymore. So it's really cool. I should have brought a bottle of Vim. I'm a big Vim user. I love Vim. Vim is a very good example of a kind of a legacy technology that's somehow made a comeback that is absolutely incredible. You can say that Vim is kind of a Tom Jones of software development, right? It was a big thing in the 70s and the 80s, and all of a sudden it comes back at the end of the 90s and 2000s. It's like, you're still around? Yeah, of course, and still working. But Vim is a great thing, seriously. By the way, I'm going to continue my talk right now. We're going to talk about Vim, because Vim is an absolutely incredible thing. No, okay, well, better not. Seriously, the most important thing to learn is the fundamentals. So I leave you with this quote that I found on internet, and this is fascinating. This guy says that he graduated in computer science in the early 2000s, and when he took a database class, there was no NoSQL. When he took a computer graphics class, there was no OpenGL with shaders. Computer security, nobody knew about botnets. Artificial intelligence, nobody knew about deep learning. Programming languages class, nobody knew that reactive was a thing, etc., etc., etc. So the message is, learn the fundamentals, because the rest will change anyway. Okay? Number 4, keep on learning. Of course, we are in an industry where we have to keep up continuously. We have to move on every year. There's something new to learn. Keep away from the hype, but still keep learning old things or new things if you want. And I found 2 simple rules that have helped me stay afloat and somehow stay relevant in the industry for good or for worse. First of all, what I do every year is to consciously choose. I pick a new programming language and I try to make something useful with it, okay? I try to go beyond the hello world, but of course I'm not going to implement a whole system out of scratch of it. But I think it is super interesting to do something cool with a new programming language. And in my case, my personal choice is a calculator. I always try to create a calculator. A calculator is a very simple machine. It's a very simple thing in itself. It has very simple rules. Yet, it can give you a very good idea of how to build a UI, for example, if it's a UI toolkit that you're learning. It can give you a very good idea of how events are modeled and passed, and how threading happens, and how you make, how the floating point operations work in those programming languages. So in my personal choice, a calculator works pretty well. It gives me quite a good idea of a language, and sometimes I end up using those languages in my real day-to-day work, sometimes not. But every programming language will bring something to the mix in your head, will change your views, and you're going to start seeing connections between those programming languages, and you're going to realize how much everything is much of the same. The second trick is to read 6 books per year. This is something that I have stuck to a schedule. I tell myself to read 6 books a year. Of course, most of these books are technical books. Most of what I read is actually computer books and programming languages books. This is something that I read a lot. Read books about history. That is a subject that I like a lot. So I'm going to leave you with 6 other ideas for books. So right now you have 2 years of reading in front of you because of the previous slide and this one. And here I propose to you Peopleware, which might open your eyes on your working conditions. The Psychology of Computer Programming, which might look like a mirror to you. Facts and Fallacies of Software Engineering, which is a hidden gem. I think it's absolutely fascinating. The Design of Everyday Things, because design is very, very important. Rework, which is an explosion on your mind of good ideas. And my personal pick of last year, Agile from Bertrand Meyer. Bertrand Meyer, for those who don't know him by name, he's the creator of Eiffel, the programming language. He's a teacher in the computer science department in the University of Zurich. And he not only is brilliant in the subject, he's an excellent writer. He's witty, he's fun, sarcastic, but in a good way. It's kind of an English, kind of Monty Python kind of humor. It's hilarious. This book is absolutely hilarious. If you are doing anything with Agile, and most of you are, read Agile, the Good, the Hype, and the Ugly by Bertrand Meyer. Highly recommended. So now you have 2 years of reading. And remember always the word of Mr. Coding Horror, Jeff Atwood, the creator of Stack Overflow, among other things, who said that he would learn Unix. And there you go. He's a heavy Windows developer. He's always been very, very bully in terms of Windows. And now he actually says this as well. And remember that learning old things and learning new things can open up your mind. And what is mind? No matter. What is matter? Never mind. The 5th most important thing that has helped me a lot is to teach. Teaching is absolutely incredible. Whenever you learn something, you go and you teach somebody else that thing, and by doing that, you actually are making the world a better place. I have this anecdote that I told in the cab coming here with Joshua, and I had a training on HTML5 a couple of years ago. I was teaching HTML5, and I had a woman attending my training, and she was pretty worried. She came to me during the training and said, yeah, you know what's going on. I just had a kid, and I am a Flash developer. And this was 2011, okay? I'm a Flash developer. So I had worked during 12 years, and I don't know what happened, and now I don't have work anymore. And I'm like, well, the iPhone happened. That's what killed Flash, literally. So yeah, I'm sorry, but nobody else was requesting Flash websites ever. And she was out of a job with a kid, recently born baby. And she came to my training. She learned what I could teach about HTML5, and a couple of weeks later, she sent me an email. to thank me because she had found a job as a JavaScript developer. So I don't know how much, but I know that I nudged the world to a better place, just a little bit. And that made the whole difference. That email, I printed it out, I keep it next, because it gives me the idea that something good comes out of all of this mess that is our lives. So that's why I teach, and I've been trying to teach for a couple of years now. This is something that you gotta learn, and maybe you already know, is that workplaces suck deeply, and there's no way around it. This is the way things go, and the worst cancer we have in our industry is the open space. There's no other way to put it. Nobody can come to me and say, no, but you know what? No, it's a cancer. It should be removed. Nobody that does anything interesting with their brains, and particularly software engineering, but it could be anyone, could be an accountant, could be a lawyer, should be working in an open space. It's absolutely the worst environment for making your brain work properly. And it's very unfortunate. And the only reason that is actually a valid reason to use an open space is because it's cheaper. And that's the reason why you are, all of you, probably working on, apart from some lucky ones, I hope, who have a private office, but most of you are in an open office. And open offices are a cancer. And I have a personal battle trying to debunk all the myths and trying to show people that it's not working. Keeping this idea in mind helps a little bit to cope with the fact that it's unavoidable. You have to deal with that. And workplaces suck not only because of office space. Unfortunately, there's also harassment. There's harassment of women, harassment of LGBT people, people from other religions. Even in Europe, supposedly very liberal and everything. In Switzerland, we have a huge problem of harassment of women, who is completely unspoken. And it starts to come out very little by little, much too slowly to my taste. We are not really talking about that, and it's appalling, and you gotta fight against that. Workplaces suck. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. But it doesn't have to be like that. So we have a duty, I think, to change things and to make it more inclusive and less stressful for all of us. Know your worth. This is something that you gotta keep in mind when you are dealing in these workplaces that unfortunately suck. And you know, there's this famous myth of the 10 times engineer. You've probably heard, the 10 times engineer. You know what? The 10 times engineer is not a myth, but it doesn't work the way you've been told. And I will tell you a little secret. Let's say that you generate 100,000 of whatever the currency, and that's your yearly salary, okay? The famous 10 times engineer thing has to do with the fact that you are actually generating $1 million on that currency per year. I will let that sink in for a minute, because that's exactly what's going on. You are being underpaid. We are generating as an industry a tremendous amount of value, incredible amount of value. We are changing the face of the world with software. We are changing the world in directions that are not always good in some ethical sense, but we are changing it. But we're not getting the retribution, and somebody else is getting the bonuses, and somebody else is buying the Porsche at the end of the year. Have you realized? And somebody else is getting the raises, and somebody else is getting the promotions. It's not the developer. Unfortunately, you are a developer, and you're probably going to remain a developer for the whole of your life. There's very little career paths in the industry. Maybe in the United States it happens, in Europe it doesn't happen. In Europe, if you're a developer, you're going to end up a developer, and then one day you're going to quit. And big deal, I have a queue of 10 other developers waiting to take your job, and they will do it for cheaper. There's absolutely no long-term value proposition in the industry, and I find that very, very incredible. And there's this whole attitude against developers that builds up, and that is reflected by this. A customer walks into a bar, he asks for a beer made out of wine. The project manager agrees, and both question the bartender's competence. And this is the story of our lives, right? So let us be very clear. The 10-time engineer thing exists. It's not what you've been told. Send the elevator down. I am conscious of the fact that I'm a white male. And this is a personal thing. I'm a white male. I'm very privileged just because I'm a white male. There's a tremendous amount. And I live in Switzerland. I didn't even mention that fact, okay? My obligation, and this is a personal thing, my obligation as a human being is to send the elevator down. And this is an obligation. And I think it could be good that you reflect on this. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your lives. You decide, and of course, you're grown-ups, and you decide what you want. I have taken the decision to actually send the elevator down. And this means helping others reach the position that I have. I don't fear people coming taking my job. I can give my job any day. I've done it. I've left very well-paid jobs. I don't really care about the money. I really care about people being able to build trust on their peers, to be able to walk to their jobs every morning having a smile on their faces, which is something that I lost at some point. I don't want people to lose that. So I think it's an obligation of our industry to realize that there is a lot of social groups that are being discriminated, and that shouldn't happen. In any case, we are better than that. It's like I was saying yesterday about accessibility. Accessibility is about empathy. It's about putting yourself on the shoes of the other person, saying, okay, I understand your problem, it's okay. I don't feel pity for you, I'm not sad for you, I'm going to help you. This attitude is something that we badly need in the industry. It's something absolutely lacking. It's sometimes you hear conversations between developers and talking about how Joshua was telling me the anecdote of developers telling him, oh, worker unions are so useless. Well, of course, you've never worked in a mine, right? There you go. Of course they are useless. If you've never done any work with your hands in a dangerous environment, you never needed maybe a worker union. But worker unions are super important. And I actually wonder, where's the software worker union? Maybe I should start it. I don't know. I actually think we need it. Personal opinion. Go back to technical things. Something that has helped me a lot lately to choose technologies and to move forward, LLVM. Pay attention to LLVM. LLVM is right now the most important project in the history of software. And I cannot put enough emphasis on these words. I cannot state how important LLVM is for the industry. All of the cool things that have happened, not only in iOS, but in many, many other places, including Android, have been powered by LLVM in one way or another. Rust, Swift, of course, the Piston, the Python engine, Mscripton, Metal, and what's the name? Accelerator, there you go. All of these things, and many, many more, including the Android NDK, have been powered at some point by LLVM. Facebook uses LLVM internally to power their website. It's known that Dropbox has published this Piston Python engine made with LLVM, and it's in current heavy development, and it's supposedly one of the fastest Python runtimes that you can find even now, even if it's not ready. It's an incredible platform. LLVM is powering the future. Pay close attention to anything that happens in LLVM, because even in the world of iOS, for those of you who are iOS developers, you've been living in LLVM for a couple of years. So you've seen Objective-C blocks, for example. Objective-C blocks, it's a byproduct of working on of the work done by Chris Latner and all the team of LLVM. Swift, of course. Arc, maybe Arc is the biggest contribution that LLVM has done to our platform as well. Basically, having the compiler check for memory leaks for you at compile time, that's a brilliant idea. I'm sorry, it's one of the most brilliant ideas I've heard. LLVM is powering two of the most loved languages of 2015, Rust and Swift, both based on LLVM. This is the Stack Overflow survey from 2015. And of course, there's a lot of discussion. Swift, by many, and in my opinion as well, is the rightful successor of C#. in terms of platform, of features, of where we're going. I think Swift is extremely important in an historical point of view, but not so much Swift itself, but actually LLVM itself. So pay close attention to LLVM. That is something very important. And then whatever I say here, take with a grain of salt and follow your gut. Do what you think is right. You're smart people, very smart people. You have studied, you've traveled, you know several languages, both programming and human languages, and you can make your choices, and you should make your choices. And following your gut is something that will pay in the long run. In my case, when I saw the introduction of .NET in a conference in June 2000, I told myself that would be pretty big. And indeed, I ended up working in .NET and C# for almost 8 years. Then I saw the introduction of the iPhone, and I told myself, wow, wait a second, this might be something. And it was something, and it brought me here. And we're still seeing the ripples of this change in our industry. So follow your gut, because I took these two decisions with a little bit of, I was pretty young when I chose .NET, basically. I had not even 5 years of experience in the industry. So this was a gut feeling. I told myself, this might work. So follow your gut. This is very, very important. You should always follow your heart. Follow your heart. Fart. You should always fart. APIs are king. For those of you mobile developers, which is pretty much every one of you, my biggest observation in the world of mobile apps is that APIs are king. If the API is good, the mobile app will probably be very, very good. If the API is bad, the mobile app might be good, but you have absolutely no guarantees. A good API, a good foundation for your mobile app, in my opinion, is much more important than the app itself. The app itself, of course, must be beautiful, usable, fast, and performant and everything. But the API, people, the API, if you got a good API with good parameters, instead of a chatty design, you use a chunky design, and you optimize your payload for cellular delivery on very poor networks, and then you make it, you use HTTP2, and then you use Socket.io, and then you use Erlang maybe on the back end, so you have everything running, and you can serve thousands of users at the same time, and the whole thing is flawless and has plenty of tests. If you do that, and you push as much logic as you can on the API, you're going to have tremendous success on your mobile apps, and you're going to have a tremendous platform for the future. And that, I think, is super important. So I'm not the only one saying this. Benedict Evans is a very well-known analyst of the mobile world. He's got a newsletter that he publishes every week with very good information about not only the technicalities, but also the business around mobile. So I strongly suggest that you follow him. And he says, products and companies are created by APIs, not app stores. The API is super important. Personal recommendations, take a look at Socket.io. Think about moving your apps from a poll model to a push model. Remove the polling from the equation. Make the API push stuff to your server. Use HTTP 2.0. Use XMPP as well. Move forward in your APIs. Remove REST from the equation in the long term. Explore new alternatives, because this will bring lots of benefits to you and lots of success as well, in my opinion. And then the final tip that I can give you today is to fight complexity. By all means, always use the KISS principle. Always. Keep it simple, stupid. With a comma. Keep it simple, comma, stupid. Very, very important. Whatever you do, make sure that you not fall in the typical traps of over-engineering your applications. Whenever an artist finishes a work of art, whether a book, could it be a painting, it could be a sculpture, there will always be a moment where she or he starts removing parts. The author will remove some paragraphs that are too much. And then the artist will work on the painting or the sculpture to make it, because there's too much. And at some point you are going to reach the minimum that has beauty, that has elegance. And as designers, we have to imitate the artists as well and remove the craft out of our designs. Make it in such a way that they are useful, minimalistic, not in the sense of the MVP, let's forget that crap, minimalistic in the sense of aesthetic minimalism, but usable, fast, performant, because we're engineers and we know how to do that, okay? But always fight complexity. And of course, you are going to have to fight with the platforms. You know, oh, let's make a Rails app. Oh, I need Rails. Oh, I need LLVM. Oh, I need Brew. Oh, I need Xcode tools. It happens. But that's why we're engineers as well. So these were my 12 tips. We come to the conclusion of my talk. The conclusion is that age doesn't matter. The true story is that whatever your age, doesn't matter if you're young or you're approaching retirement, as long as you keep a smile on your face, as long as you try to build a better world for you and your peers and your society and your environment, and you're responsible and you try to actually be better yourself, because that's the only thing you can change, is yourself, you are going to live a plentiful, beautiful life, no matter what you do. No matter if you're a software engineer, you could be anything that you want, literally. I'm a self-taught guy. I never went to computer school. So if I could do it, anybody can do it. And what has prevented me from falling back into depression or burnout is actually trying to do things that fulfill me. Feeling that mindfulness of actually doing something that counts. And this, me, here, is part of that job. It's trying to give you something. And I hope that you enjoy it. And I hope that somebody in 2035, you know, 19 years from now, somebody, some of you maybe, some young developers in the audience might give a talk called Being a Developer at 40, right? And you will start this talk, maybe, telling how was life in 2017. Well, they're going to say, well, it's the year that we lost David Bowie, Prince, and Harper Lee. There we go, Harper Lee. And it's also the year where Lee Sedol lost in Go against a machine that was actually not a brute force machine, but actually an artificial intelligence engine. And it's the year as well that SQL Server was released for Linux, right? And it's also the year Google apparently considered Swift as a first class, but this was actually confirmed to be a hoax. But I found it kind of interesting to leave it out. It's also the year where we started losing privacy, where we actually started to change our conceptions of what the state does for us and what the state has or hasn't the right to know about us at any given time. So it raises also very good questions. And we're going to be pretty close to the 2038 year problem. And people are going to get really, really worried about it as well. And it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens. But in any case, remember that nothing is as simple as it seems at first, or as hopeless as it seems in the middle, or as finished as it seems in the end. I like pony say. It's a beautiful thing. When you mix it with fortune, you get these incredible things. But the important thing is that take everything that I say about the future with a grain of salt. Because even Isaac Asimov, despite of all of his brilliance, he couldn't predict e-cigarettes or selfie sticks, right? So build your own future. Be happy. That's the most important thing for your future as a developer. Just a small parenthesis before I leave. This talk is on Medium. You probably, maybe some of you have read it already. I have to say thanks because this thing, somebody posted it on Hacker News at some point after I published it on Medium, and then this happened, and all of a sudden I started getting lots of notifications of new Twitter followers, and this happened. I had like 100,000 views on that article in a couple of days, and the response has been tremendous. The article has been translated by people who contacted me via email saying, hey, can I translate it to Czech, Hungarian, Russian, Portuguese? So the only thing I can say to you is thank you, because you are also the reason why I'm here. Thank you.